We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Seneca. What if I told you that most men don't struggle with women because they lack looks, money, or status, but because they misunderstand female psychology? What if the frustration, mixed signals, and sudden loss of attraction you've experienced had less to do with who you are and more to do with how you show up emotionally, mentally, and energetically? In today's world, men are taught to chase, explain, overgive, and seek validation. Yet Stoic men throughout history did the opposite and earned deep respect effortlessly. Women don't respond to words as much as they respond to behavior, presence, and self-mastery. And once you understand that, everything changes. This video will break down 10 powerful female behaviors every Stoic man must understand, not to manipulate, but to move with clarity, strength, and calm authority. These are patterns rooted in psychology, attraction, and timeless masculine principles that most men never learn. If you've ever wondered why silence is sometimes more powerful than effort, why emotional control creates attraction, or why detachment increases respect, this video is for you. Watch till the very end, because the final insight ties everything together and can completely shift how women perceive you, from overlooked to undeniable. Number 1. Emotional self-control over reactive validation. One of the most overlooked strengths you can build is emotional self-control, especially in a world that constantly tempts you to react for validation. You feel it in small moments, the urge to explain yourself, to prove your worth, to be seen a certain way, to get an emotional return from someone else's response. And if you're honest, you know how quickly a reaction can slip out before you've even chosen it. Stoicism doesn't ask you to suppress emotion or pretend you don't feel. It asks you to govern yourself. Wrote, "You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you." That sentence alone can change how you move through attraction, tension, and uncertainty. Emotional self-control is not coldness, it is mastery. Reactive validation pulls you outward. It makes your inner state dependent on what you receive instead of what you decide. When you seek validation, you're saying, without words, that your emotional balance lives outside of you. Epictetus warned against this exact trap. If you seek tranquility, do less. Or rather, do what is essential. And what is essential here is choosing response over reflex. The moment you react to gain reassurance, approval, or emotional certainty, you hand over your power. Not dramatically, quietly, almost politely, but power given away is still power lost. You don't need to become emotionally distant to become emotionally strong. Strength shows up as pause, as space, as restraint. It's the difference between feeling something and letting that feeling steer you. Stoicism teaches you that emotions arrive uninvited, but actions are chosen. Seneca put it simply, the greatest power is to be master of yourself. When you stop reacting for validation, you stop leaking energy. You become harder to manipulate, harder to rush, harder to pull off center. And that steadiness is deeply felt, even when nothing is said. A reactive man is predictable. His mood rises and falls based on signals, responses, tone, attention. A self-controlled man is grounded. His emotional state has weight. It doesn't chase, it doesn't demand. It doesn't hurry to fill silence or discomfort. You don't need to perform calmness, you practice it. Reminded himself, be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it. That is emotional self-control in motion. You still feel the waves, you simply don't collapse under them. Here, where you shift from understanding to embodiment, start by catching the moment before reaction. That split second matters more than you think. When you feel the impulse to respond quickly, to clarify, to seek reassurance, to adjust yourself emotionally, pause. Take one slow breath. Ask yourself a single question. Am I responding from intention or reacting for validation? That question alone creates distance. and distance creates choice. Stoicism lives in that gap. You also need to retrain your nervous system to tolerate uncertainty. Reactive validation often comes from discomfort with not knowing how you're perceived. The Stoics intentionally practiced uncertainty to reduce dependence on externals. Seneca encouraged voluntary discomfort for this reason, not as punishment, but as preparation. Your exercise here is simple and challenging. Allow emotional ambiguity to exist without resolving it. Don't rush clarity. Don't rush reassurance. Let the feeling pass on its own. It always does. This builds emotional endurance. You stop panicking internally when control is absent. Another practice is journaling, but not in a sentimental way. At the end of the day, write down moments where you felt pulled to react emotionally. Don't judge them, just note them. Then write what a controlled response would have looked like, not in words, but in state, calm, grounded, unrushed. Over time, your awareness sharpens, and awareness is the beginning of discipline. As Epictetus said, no man is free who is not master of himself. Freedom here means freedom from emotional compulsion. There's also a deeper shift that happens when you stop seeking validation. You stop negotiating your self-worth in real time. You don't need emotional returns to feel stable. Your presence becomes less needy and more complete. You're no longer trying to extract something from the moment. You're simply in it. And that changes how you're felt. Not because you're trying to be impressive, but because you're no longer internally bargaining. You may notice resistance at first. The ego doesn't like losing its shortcuts. Reacting is easier than regulating. Validation feels faster than self-trust. But Stoicism is built for the long game. Wrote, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Emotional self-control isn't something you announce or explain. It's something you practice quietly, repeatedly, especially when no one rewards you for it. Here's another exercise. Define your emotional standards. Not how you want to feel, but how you choose to behave when emotions rise. Write down 3 rules for yourself. For example, I do not respond immediately when emotionally charged. I do not explain myself to relieve discomfort. I let feelings peak and pass before acting. These are not restrictions, they are anchors. When you feel pulled off center, return to them. Structure creates freedom. Over time, something subtle but powerful happens. You stop being emotionally loud. Your silence gains gravity. Your responses slow down. You stop chasing emotional certainty and start trusting your inner order. And this trust shows. Seneca said, "He who has learned how to die has unlearned how to be a slave." In this context, dying means letting go of the need to be validated instantly. When that need dissolves, so does emotional slavery. This is not about winning interactions. It's about winning yourself back. Emotional self-control over reactive validation is the difference between being led by impulse and being guided by principle. And principles don't fluctuate. They don't panic. They don't beg. They endure. So commit to this. Not perfectly, not theatrically, just consistently. Pause more than you speak. Feel without obeying. Choose your state before you choose your response. The world will keep pulling, that's guaranteed. Your work is to remain unmoved inside while moving deliberately outside. That is Stoic masculinity. Quiet, composed, unshakable. Number 2, calm confidence without seeking approval. Calm confidence without seeking approval is not something you perform. It's something you settle into. You don't announce it. You don't prove it. You don't defend it. You simply occupy yourself fully, and that fullness changes how you move, how you speak, how you pause. Stoicism has always pointed toward this state, not as a tactic, but as a way of being. Wrote, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Calm confidence begins exactly there. The moment you stop asking how you are perceived and start asking whether you are aligned, your energy shifts. You're no longer scanning for approval. You're grounded, and grounding is felt before it is understood. You feel the difference internally first. When you are calm without seeking approval, your nervous system isn't constantly negotiating with the world. You're not bracing for reactions. You're not adjusting your tone mid-thought. You're not silently hopping your presence is enough. It already is. Epictetus said, if you seek tranquility, do less. Less explaining, less proving, less chasing the nod, the smile, the signal that you're doing it right. Calm confidence is quiet because it has nothing to sell. It doesn't rush. It doesn't lean forward emotionally. It allows things to unfold without trying to control the outcome. Approval seeking, on the other hand, always leaks urgency. Even when it's subtle, it carries a faint tension, a neediness that isn't verbal but energetic. Stoicism teaches you to reverse that pattern by shifting authority inward. No man is free who is not master of himself, Epictetus reminded. When you master your reactions, when you stop outsourcing your self-worth, confidence stops being something you try to generate and becomes something you inhabit. This is why calm confidence is so powerful. It isn't reactive. It doesn't spike and crash. It stays steady regardless of response. To live this, you must make peace with not being validated immediately or at all. That doesn't mean you reject connection. It means you no longer hinge your state of mind on it. Advised, I have often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, but yet sets less value on his own opinion of himself than on the opinion of others. Read that slowly. Calm confidence is the decision to reverse that imbalance, to respect your own judgment first, to trust your inner standard more than the room's reaction. This doesn't require arrogance or detachment. In fact, the more you seek approval, the less present you are. Calm confidence brings presence back. You listen better. You speak more deliberately. You allow silence to exist without rushing to fill it. Silence, when you are grounded, becomes a statement instead of a void. Seneca wrote, "He who knows how to be content will never be dissatisfied." Contentment is the soil where calm confidence grows. When you are internally satisfied with who you are becoming, you no longer reach outward for reassurance. Here is a practical shift you can make immediately. Start noticing when your impulse is to perform instead of to express. Performance is driven by anticipation. Expression is driven by clarity. When you catch yourself anticipating how something will land, pause, take a breath, return to intention, ask yourself, is this aligned with who I choose to be, or am I trying to manage perception? That single question pulls you back into your body, back into authority. Over time, this pause becomes natural. You stop reacting automatically. You choose deliberately. Another Stoic practice that strengthens calm confidence is negative visualization, but applied inward. Imagine approval being absent. Imagine neutrality. Imagine silence. And then ask yourself if you can still remain composed, respectful, and self-directed. This isn't about expecting rejection. It's about realizing you don't need applause to remain steady. Seneca often encouraged rehearsing adversity so that it loses its power. When you rehearse not being approved of and remain calm, you remove fear from the equation. Calm confidence thrives where fear has been disarmed. There is also a physical component to this. Calm confidence lives in your posture, your breathing, your packing. Stoicism is embodied philosophy. Practice slowing down intentionally. Slower movements, fewer gestures, controlled breath, not as an act but as discipline. When the body is regulated, the mind follows. Wrote, keep yourself simple, good, pure, serious, unpretentious. Simplicity in movement mirrors simplicity in intention. You don't need excess when you are anchored. One of the most powerful exercises you can adopt is this. For 1 week, remove the habit of self-justification. Notice how often you explain yourself unnecessarily. Notice how often you soften a statement to be liked. Practice stating things once calmly and stopping there. This isn't about being rigid. It's about trusting that your words don't need padding. You will feel discomfort at first. That's the withdrawal from approval dependence. Stay with it. Epictetus would call this training your faculty of choice. Each moment you resist the urge to over-explain, you strengthen inner authority. Calm confidence also means allowing others to have their reactions without managing them. You are not responsible for emotional outcomes, only for ethical action. This distinction is pure stoicism. Do what is yours to do, the rest does not concern you, as continually reminded himself. When you internalize this, you stop carrying emotional weight that was never yours. And when you put that weight down, your presence lightens, steadies, deepens. Over time, this way of being rewires how you experience yourself. You stop feeling like you're auditioning. You stop needing to be chosen to feel whole. You begin to experience confidence as calm rather than excitement, as depth rather than display. And that calm is not passive, it's potent. It communicates self-trust. It signals emotional self-sufficiency. It says, without words, I am already at home within myself. Make this your daily commitment, to act from alignment, not approval, to respond rather than react, to value your own judgment before external noise. Write it down each morning. Revisit it when you feel the old urge to lean forward emotionally. This is Stoic masculinity in practice, not hardened, not distant, but grounded and unshakable. As Seneca said, stand firm. You have nothing to lose but your chains. Calm confidence is the moment you stop rattling them. Number 3, purpose-first mindset over people-pleasing. One of the most powerful shifts you can make, especially as a stoic-minded man, is moving from a people-pleasing mindset to a purpose-first way of living. This isn't about becoming distant or indifferent. It's about reclaiming authorship over your inner world. When purpose comes first, your actions are rooted. When people-pleasing comes first, your actions are reactive. You feel the difference immediately. One feels solid, quiet, grounded. The other feels busy, anxious, slightly off balance. Wrote, if you seek tranquility, do less, or more accurately, do what's essential. Purpose clarifies what is essential. People-pleasing clouds it. You often don't notice when you've slipped into people-pleasing because it disguises itself as kindness, flexibility, or emotional intelligence. But look closer. There's usually an unspoken hope attached to it, a desire to be liked, to be chosen, to avoid friction. And that hope slowly replaces direction. You start adjusting yourself not based on what you believe is right, but on how you think you'll be perceived. The Stoics were ruthless about this kind of self-betrayal. Epictetus warned, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. In other words, stop outsourcing your sense of worth. Purpose demands that you're willing to be misunderstood. A purpose-first mindset changes how you show up at a fundamental level. You're no longer scanning for approval. You're checking alignment. You ask yourself, is this consistent with who I've decided to be? Not, will this be received well? That single shift removes enormous psychological noise. You stop. You stop negotiating your boundaries internally. You stop trying to manage emotions that aren't yours to manage. Seneca said, a man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary. People-pleasing is premature suffering. Purpose eliminates that excess. There's a calm authority that comes from knowing your direction. Not loud, not performative, just steady. When purpose leads, your words slow down, your decisions become cleaner. You don't rush to fill silence or smooth discomfort. You allow things to unfold without chasing control. And this isn't accidental. It's the result of internal order. Reminded himself, you don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. A purpose-first mindset lets you leave moments untouched, instead of constantly interfering for reassurance. People-pleasing fragments you. One version of you here, another version there. Purpose integrates you. It gives you a center of gravity. Without it, you end up adapting so much that you forget what you were adapting from. And when you're intelligent, this is even more dangerous. You can justify anything. You can rationalize the erosion of your standards as maturity or empathy. But Stoicism cuts through that fog. It asks one hard question again and again. Is this within your control, and is this in accordance with your values? If not, let it go. Here's a practice to ground this shift. At the start of your day, before external demands rush in, define one non-negotiable principle for how you will act. Not an outcome, a way of being. Something like, today I respond deliberately, not reflexively, or today I don't trade self-respect for harmony. Write it, read it, carry it mentally. When the urge to please arises, pause and measure your response against that principle. This pause is where freedom lives. Epictetus said, between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power. Protect that space. Another exercise is to practice deliberate restraint. Not coldness, restraint. Allow yourself to not immediately respond, to not clarify, to not soften your stance. Let your actions stand on their own. Notice how uncomfortable that feels at first. That discomfort is withdrawal. You're breaking a habit of dependency. Seneca encouraged voluntary discomfort for this reason, to remind yourself that you can endure far more than you think without external validation. Purpose-first living also means redefining connection. Connection doesn't require self-erasure. Real connection respects boundaries, direction, and individuality. When you stop people-pleasing, you don't lose connection, you lose noise. You gain clarity. You show up as a complete person, not an adjustable version. Wrote, stand straight or be held straight. Purpose helps you stand straight on your own. Over time, something subtle but profound happens. You feel less urgency, less need to prove, less need to manage impressions. You start trusting your internal compass again. And when that trust is restored, your presence changes. Not because you're trying to be attractive or dominant, but because you're no longer divided internally. Seneca said, wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness. Purpose first doesn't eliminate kindness, it purifies it. Your kindness becomes a choice, not a strategy. So take this seriously but gently. You don't need to reject people, you need to stop abandoning yourself. Purpose is not rigidity, it's coherence. It's knowing what you stand for when no one is watching and acting from that place when everyone is. Start small, pause more, choose alignment over applause. Each time you do, you reinforce the identity of a man who is led from within. And that, the Stoics would tell you, is real strength. Number 4, strong boundaries with quiet enforcement. Strong boundaries with quiet enforcement aren't about control, dominance, or making a point. They're about self-respect made visible without noise. Most men misunderstand boundaries because they think boundaries are words. They aren't. Words are optional. Boundaries are decisions you've already made internally, long before they're ever tested. When you truly have them, you don't announce them, explain them, or defend them. You live them. And that calm consistency is what gives them weight. Epictetus said it best. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. When your boundaries are real, they don't need speeches. They speak through your behavior, your pace, your willingness to walk away from what violates your inner order. Quiet enforcement begins inside you. It starts the moment you decide what you will and will not tolerate, not based on fear of loss, but based on alignment with your values. A Stoic man does not ask permission to respect himself. He doesn't wait for understanding or agreement. Wrote, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. That applies to your boundaries as well. If something violates your sense of right order, you don't debate it internally. You don't negotiate with your instincts. You honor them. And the more you honor them, the less often they need to be tested. You'll notice something subtle when your boundaries are solid. You stop overreacting. You stop trying to correct, convince, or control. You don't rush to fix behavior that crosses a line. You simply adjust your presence. Your energy shifts. Your availability changes. Your engagement recalibrates. This is quiet enforcement. No drama. No emotional spike. No explanation tour. Seneca warned, "He suffers more than necessary who suffers before it is necessary." Loud enforcement is suffering before it's necessary. Quiet enforcement is confidence in your own standards. The reason this matters so deeply in relationships is because boundaries create emotional safety, not by pleasing but by being predictable in principle. When your reactions are grounded instead of reactive, your presence becomes steady. You're no longer pulled into emotional turbulence. You don't punish, you don't chase, you don't withdraw in anger, you simply remain aligned. That alignment is what people feel as strength, not force, not intimidation, strength. As Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Boundaries are self-mastery in motion. Here, where you need to be honest with yourself. Weak boundaries don't come from kindness, they come from fear. Fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood, fear of losing connection. But Stoicism teaches you that anything maintained through self-betrayal is already lost. Reminded himself, is this necessary? Ask that question when you feel the urge to over-explain your boundary. Is it necessary to justify your standards, or is it enough to live them? The more you answer honestly, the quieter your enforcement becomes. To build this skill deliberately, you need practice, not theory. Start with this exercise. Define 3 non-negotiables for your inner life. Not rules for others, rules for yourself. Things like how you respond under pressure, how you treat your time, how you engage emotionally. Write them down, then commit to enforcing them through action alone. No announcements, no warnings, just alignment. This trains your nervous system to trust your decisions instead of second-guessing them. Another Stoic practice is negative visualization, not to invite pessimism, but to remove fear. Seneca encouraged imagining loss to reduce its power over you. Visualize what happens if a boundary costs you approval. Sit with it. Notice that you remain intact. That exercise loosens the grip of fear and strengthens your resolve. When you are no longer afraid of losing what violates your values, enforcement becomes effortless. Quiet enforcement also means resisting the temptation to win interactions. You don't need to prove that you're right. You don't need the last word. You don't need validation for your stance. Wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." In modern terms, that means you don't mirror chaos with chaos. You remain steady. You don't escalate. You simply don't participate in what dishonors your standards. Over time, something powerful happens. Your boundaries start working before you even speak. People sense where you stand because you stand there consistently. There's no confusion, no mixed signals, no emotional bargaining, and that clarity creates respect without demand. Respect that has to be demanded is not respect, it's compliance. Stoicism aims higher than that. It aims for inner authority, authority that doesn't shout. You'll also notice how much lighter you feel. Boundaries remove resentment. Resentment is what builds when you say yes while meaning no. When you quietly enforce your limits, resentment has no place to grow. Seneca warned, anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it. Strong boundaries prevent anger by stopping self-betrayal at the source. This is your daily work, not perfection but consistency. Each time you honor your boundary without drama, you reinforce your self-respect. Each time you resist explaining yourself unnecessarily, you reclaim energy. Each time you choose alignment over approval, you grow calmer, more grounded, more sovereign. So take this seriously but softly. You don't need to harden yourself. You need to root yourself. Strong boundaries with quiet enforcement are not about pushing others away. They're about standing firmly in who you are so nothing external can pull you off center. As wrote, be like the rock against which the waves continually break. It stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it. Be that rock, quiet, steady, unmoved. Number 5, comfort with silent and emotional space. One of the most quietly powerful qualities you can cultivate is comfort with silence and emotional space. Not the awkward kind you rush to fill, not the tense kind you apologize for, but the grounded, intentional stillness that says you are not afraid of your own presence. Most men misunderstand silence. They treat it like a problem to solve, a gap to close, a signal that something is wrong. Stoicism teaches you the opposite. Silence is not absence, it is structure. It is proof that you are not ruled by impulse. Epictetus put it simply, nature has given us one tongue and two ears so that we may hear twice as much as we speak. When you're at ease with silence, you stop leaking energy. You stop performing. You allow depth to form without forcing it. You feel the pull to talk when uncertainty appears. You feel it in your chest, that slight urgency to explain yourself, to clarify, to keep things moving. But that urge is rarely about connection. It's about control. It's about soothing your own discomfort. When you learn to sit with silence, you learn to sit with yourself. Wrote, "Nowhere can a man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." Silence is that retreat made visible. It shows that you trust your inner stability more than external noise. That trust changes how you move, how you listen, how you are perceived. Emotional space works the same way. You don't crowd feelings, you don't rush responses, you don't demand immediate clarity or resolution. You allow emotions to exist without trying to manage them. This is not indifference, it's restraint. Seneca warned against emotional excess, saying, "He who is angry at a fault mends not the fault." Emotional space gives room for understanding instead of reaction. When you don't chase emotional intensity, you create safety without trying to. You show that you are not overwhelmed by what arises. That steadiness is rare, and rarity carries weight. What most men don't realize is that silence communicates far more than words ever could. It communicates self-trust. It communicates patience. It communicates that your worth does not depend on filling the air. When you rush to speak, you're often trying to prove something. When you're comfortable not speaking, you are being something. The Stoics valued this deeply. They believed mastery of the self begins with mastery of impulse, and speech is impulse's favorite escape route. Epictetus advised, "Let silence be your general rule. Say only what is necessary and in few words." Not because words are dangerous, but because unnecessary words reveal unnecessary need. To build this comfort, you have to stop treating silence as a threat. Start seeing it as training. Here is a simple exercise. Throughout your day, notice every moment where you feel the urge to speak just to relieve tension. Pause instead. Breathe once. Let the moment stand. You are not withdrawing. You are choosing. Over time, this pause becomes natural. Your nervous system learns that nothing bad happens when you don't rush. This is how emotional maturity is built, quietly, internally, without applause. Another practice is intentional non-reaction. When something stirs emotion in you, do not label it immediately. Do not express it immediately. Sit with it. The Stoics called this examining impressions, reminded himself daily, you don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. Emotional space allows impressions to settle before they harden into reactions. You become less predictable, not because you're hiding, but because you're no longer automatic. Silence also sharpens your listening. When you stop preparing your next sentence, you start hearing what is actually being said and what is. This is where understanding deepens, not through analysis, but through presence. Seneca wrote, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." Learning to live includes learning when not to speak, when not to respond, when to let a moment breathe. Silence teaches patience. Emotional space teaches trust. You may fear that silence makes you invisible or disconnected. The opposite is true. Silence gives your words gravity. Emotional space gives your responses precision. When you do speak, it's not noise, it's intention. You are no longer trying to manage outcomes. You are simply aligned with yourself. That alignment is felt, even when nothing is said. Here is another exercise to anchor this habit. Choose one daily interaction where you consciously speak less than you normally would, not in a withdrawn way, but in a deliberate one. Let pauses exist. Let your body remain relaxed. Notice how often meaning fills the space without your help. This is not a trick. It is discipline. Stoicism is built on discipline of attention, discipline of response, discipline of desire. Ultimately, comfort with silence and emotional space is comfort with uncertainty. And uncertainty is where most people panic. You don't, you stay, you observe, you allow. That calm is not passive, it is controlled, it is chosen. Captured this inner posture when he wrote, "Be like the rocky headland on which the waves constantly break. It stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it." Silence is that headland. Emotional space is that firmness. So stop rushing, stop filling, stop proving. Practice stillness until it feels natural. Practice emotional restraint until it feels empowering. You don't need to dominate the moment. You need to be grounded in it. When you are, everything else adjusts around you. Number 6, non-attachment to outcomes or attention. One of the most misunderstood strengths you can develop is non-attachment to outcomes or attention. It sounds passive at first, almost like withdrawal, but it's the opposite. This is not about indifference, it's about freedom. When you stop tying your inner state to how things turn out or how much attention you receive, something in you settles. You move differently. You speak without needing to be received a certain way. You listen without waiting to be rewarded. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus said, "Seek not that events should happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do, and your life will go smoothly." Smoothly doesn't mean effortlessly. It means without inner friction, without that constant background noise of hopping, fearing, calculating. You felt that noise before, the mental checking, the subtle leaning forward emotionally, the quiet urge to be noticed, to be chosen, to be affirmed. Even when you don't act on it, it's there. And the moment your peace depends on attention or outcomes, you give away leverage, not social leverage, inner leverage. You start reacting instead of choosing. You begin adjusting your energy, your words, your timing, all in service of a result you don't control. Warned against this when he wrote, "You disturb yourself by caring too much." That disturbance is not dramatic, it's subtle, it's the loss of stillness. Non-attachment is not emotional numbness, it's emotional discipline. It's the decision to invest effort without demanding a specific return, to show up fully without gripping the outcome. This is powerful because most people are transparent in their attachment. Their mood shifts based on attention. Their confidence rises and falls with response. When you are non-attached, your state becomes harder to influence. You stop signaling need. You stop broadcasting expectation. And expectation, whether you realize it or not, is pressure. People feel it. Energy always communicates before words do. The Stoics never asked you to stop wanting. They asked you to stop clinging. Seneca wrote, "He who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." Attachment is suffering in advance. You rehearse disappointment. You preload anxiety. You turn possibility into a test of your worth. Non-attachment cuts that loop. You act because action aligns with who you are, not because you're trying to secure a reaction. That difference changes how your presence lands. Here, where this becomes practical, start by separating effort from expectation. You can care deeply about how you act while caring very little about how it's received. That's a skill. It takes practice. Each time you do something aligned with your values, pause afterward and consciously release the outcome. Say it internally if you need to. "I did my part. The rest is not mine." This echoes Epictetus' core teaching. Some things are up to you and some things are not. Confusing the two is the source of anxiety. Clarity between them is the source of calm. Another habit to build is attention fasting. Notice how often you check mentally for response, recognition, or validation. Not just externally, but internally. That subtle self-scan. When you catch it, don't suppress it, just don't feed it. Let the urge pass without acting on it. This is Stoic training in real time. Reminded himself, you can leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. When you remember how temporary attention is, you stop chasing it like it's permanent currency. Non-attachment also sharpens your masculinity in a quiet way. When you are not outcome dependent, you stop rushing. You stop forcing momentum. You allow things to unfold at their natural pace. There is confidence in patience. There is authority in not needing to push. This doesn't make you distant. It makes you grounded. You become present instead of performative. Seneca observed, the greatest power is to be master of oneself. Mastery here means not being yanked around by invisible strings of hope and fear. Try this exercise regularly. Before entering any interaction or situation where attention or outcomes matter to you, define your intention instead of your desired result. An intention is internal. A result is external. You might say, my intention is to be clear, calm, and honest. That's it. Nothing about how it should go. Nothing about what should happen next. Then hold yourself accountable only to that intention. This trains your nervous system to associate satisfaction with integrity, not reward. Another practice is negative visualization, a classic Stoic tool. Briefly imagine the outcome not going your way, not to scare yourself but to neutralize fear. When you see that you would still be intact, still dignified, still yourself, attachment loosens. Seneca used this deliberately, reminding himself that loss only hurts when you pretend it's impossible. Once you accept uncertainty, it loses its grip. Over time, non-attachment changes your internal rhythm. You become less reactive. Your emotions last shorter. Your thoughts don't spiral as easily. You stop replaying moments, dissecting signals, or assigning meaning where none is required. You conserve energy, and that energy returns as clarity. You know when to act and when to step back, not because you're calculating, but because you're listening inwardly instead of scanning outwardly. This is where stoicism and masculinity meet cleanly. Strength is not control over others. It's control over your own responses. When attention comes, you receive it without inflating. When it doesn't, you don't deflate. You remain even. Call this being like a rock against which the waves keep crashing. Not unmoved because you're numb, but unmoved because you're rooted. So take this seriously but gently. Non-attachment is not something you force. It's something you practice daily through small acts of release. Let go sooner, expect less, act fully. Judge yourself by your alignment, not by applause. When you do this consistently, you'll notice something subtle but profound. You'll feel lighter, clearer, more solid. And from that place, everything you do carries more weight, because it's no longer asking for anything in return. Number 7. Consistent actions over verbal promises. One of the most overlooked truths you need to internalize is this: words are light, actions are heavy. You can say almost anything, promise almost anything, explain almost anything, but only what you consistently do carries weight. Stoicism has always emphasized this distinction. Didn't tell himself to talk about virtue, he reminded himself to be it. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. That line alone dismantles the illusion that intention or expression is enough. When your actions repeat themselves calmly and predictably, they communicate something far deeper than speech ever could. And when it comes to attraction, trust, and respect, consistency is the language that's always understood. You live in a world that rewards talking, announcing goals, declaring values, explaining intentions, but psychology doesn't respond to declarations, it responds to patterns. The mind looks for alignment, it scans for reliability. It asks quietly, does this person do what he says even when it's inconvenient? Stoicism teaches you to shift your focus away from being believed and toward being dependable. Epictetus was blunt about this. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. When your behavior stays steady regardless of mood, pressure, or outcome, it sends a signal of inner order. And inner order is rare. The mistake many men make is assuming that clarity of speech equals clarity of character. It doesn't. Words can be rehearsed. Actions cannot be faked for long. Consistency requires discipline, and discipline requires self-command. That's why Stoics valued it so deeply. A man who acts the same way in private as he does in public doesn't need to convince anyone of his strength. His rhythm does the work for him. You don't need to promise stability when you are stable. You don't need to promise respect when your behavior already shows restraint, boundaries, and self-control. What you must understand is that inconsistency creates cognitive friction. Even when your words sound good, uneven behavior creates uncertainty. And uncertainty erodes trust faster than silence ever could. Warned, the things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Extend that idea outward. The things you repeatedly do determine the quality of your presence. If your actions fluctuate based on emotion, desire, or external response, your presence becomes noisy. Stoicism invites you to simplify. Fewer explanations, fewer promises, more repetition of grounded behavior. This doesn't mean becoming rigid or robotic. It means becoming reliable. Consistency is not intensity. It's calm repetition, showing up the same way, responding instead of reacting, choosing principle over impulse. Seneca wrote, "Time discovers truth." Over time, consistent action reveals who you really are, whether you like it or not. That's why the Stoic path asks you to focus on what's within your control, your choices, your habits, your standards. Not how you're perceived in the moment, but who you prove yourself to be over time. If you want to live this instead of just agreeing with it, you need to train it. Start with a simple practice. Reduce your verbal commitments by half. Notice how often you feel the urge to promise, reassure, or explain. Pause. Ask yourself whether a quiet action could communicate the same thing more honestly. This builds restraint. Restraint builds credibility. Another exercise is to choose one small, repeatable behavior that aligns with your values and perform it daily without announcing it to anyone. No witnesses, no validation, just repetition. This is pure Stoic training. As Epictetus said, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Let your actions mature in silence. You should also practice delaying speech. When emotions rise, resist the reflex to talk your way into safety. Stoicism teaches that emotional control is not suppression but timing. Reminded himself, you don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. Silence paired with consistent action creates a sense of groundedness that words cannot replicate. Over time, people stop listening to what you say and start watching what you do, and that's when your influence deepens. Consistency also protects your self-respect. Every empty promise chips away at your internal trust. You begin to doubt yourself. You start compensating with more words. It becomes a loop. Breaking it restores alignment. Seneca warned, be careful how you live. Don't waste your time on what doesn't make you better. Each consistent action, no matter how small, is a vote for the man you're becoming. You don't need dramatic gestures. You need clean habits. The paradox is that when you stop promising, you become more trustworthy. When you stop explaining, you become clearer. When you stop trying to be convincing, you become believable. This is not strategy, it's integrity. Stoicism strips life down to essentials. What you control, what you practice, what you repeat. Everything else is noise. So take this as a challenge. For the next week, say less, commit internally, act externally. Let your behavior do the speaking. When you feel the urge to promise, replace it with follow-through. When you feel the urge to impress, return to discipline. When you feel the urge to justify, return to consistency. Said, confidence comes from being prepared. Preparation here is habit. Habit is action. Action is truth. You don't need to be louder. You need to be steadier. That's the Stoic advantage. Number 8, respect for feminine emotion without absorption. One of the most misunderstood strengths you can develop as a Stoic man is learning how to respect feminine emotion without absorbing it. This is subtle work, quiet work, and because it's quiet, most men miss it entirely. You're taught, directly or indirectly, that emotional moments require fixing, calming, rescuing, or matching energy. But Stoicism points you in a different direction, not toward indifference, not toward detachment, but toward steadiness, toward being present without being pulled off center. Reminded himself, be like the promontory against which the waves continually break. It stands firm, and around it the seething waters are laid to rest. That image matters. You are not the wave, you are the shore. Respecting emotion means you acknowledge it as real, valid, and human, not as a threat, not as a problem you must solve, and certainly not as something you must take into your own nervous system. Absorbing emotion is what happens when you confuse empathy with surrender, when you let someone else's emotional weather decide your internal climate. Over time, this drains you. It makes you reactive, anxious, overly cautious. And ironically, it reduces respect rather than increasing it. Epictetus was clear. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Sometimes that foolishness looks like not reacting the way emotion expects you to react. It looks like calm where chaos wants company. You feel the pull to absorb emotion most strongly when you believe harmony must be maintained at all costs. So you soften your truth, you rush to soothe. You take responsibility for feelings that are not yours to carry. But Stoicism teaches you a sharper form of compassion, one that says, I can see you, hear you, and remain myself. Seneca wrote, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. When you absorb emotion, you magnify it internally. You relive it. You wrestle with it long after the moment has passed. Respect, on the other hand, allows emotion to move without becoming lodged inside you. This doesn't mean you become cold or dismissive. In fact, it requires more discipline than emotional fusion ever did. It takes strength to stay grounded when intensity rises. It takes confidence to listen without rushing to respond. And it takes self-respect to know where your responsibility ends. Said, do not let your mind run on what you lack as much as on what you have already. What you have is control over your judgments, your actions, your tone, your presence. What you do not have is control over another person's emotional state. The Stoic man knows the difference. When you stop absorbing emotion, your presence changes. You listen more fully because you are not preparing a defense or a solution. Your silence becomes intentional rather than awkward. You stop taking emotional expression personally, which frees you from the need to explain yourself endlessly. This is not passivity. It is mastery. Epictetus taught that events themselves do not disturb us. Our judgments about them do. Emotional expression is an event. Your absorption of it is a judgment. And judgments can be trained. Here is where practice matters. Reading about this is not enough. Start with a simple daily exercise. When emotion appears around you, silently remind yourself, this is not mine to carry. Not in a dismissive way, but in a grounding way. Feel your feet, slow your breath, let your shoulders drop. You are not withdrawing, you are stabilizing. Another Stoic exercise is negative visualization, not to create fear, but to create resilience. Imagine emotional intensity without imagining your collapse. Picture yourself steady, listening, unmoved internally. This mental rehearsal trains your nervous system to respond rather than react. You also need to practice separating understanding from agreement. Respect does not mean you must align with every emotional conclusion. Seneca warned, no man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity. Emotional moments are a form of adversity. They test your center. You can acknowledge feeling without surrendering your perspective. That distinction preserves both honesty and dignity. You don't argue emotion. You don't mirror it. You witness it. That witnessing is powerful. Over time, you'll notice a shift in yourself. You become less exhausted after emotional exchanges. You stop replaying conversations in your head. You no longer feel the need to prove your intentions. This is what inner freedom feels like in practice. Wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." In this context, the best response to emotional turbulence is not turbulence of your own. It's calm. Calm that is not performative, not superior, not rigid. Just calm. Another practical habit is journaling at night, but with a specific lens. Ask yourself one question. Where today did I absorb what I could have respected? Don't shame yourself. Observe. Awareness sharpens instinct. The Stoics believed reflection was essential to character. Over weeks, you'll see patterns. Certain tones, certain triggers, certain moments where you abandon your center. That awareness is progress. Respect without absorption also deepens masculinity in a quiet way. Not the loud, performative kind, but the grounded kind that doesn't need to announce itself. You stop chasing emotional equilibrium externally because you've built it internally. You become consistent, predictable in your steadiness. That consistency creates trust, not because you manage emotions, but because you don't disappear into them. Remember this, emotion is movement. Your role is not to block it or drown in it, but to stand firm while it passes. As reminded himself daily, nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. Build that retreat. Visit it often. And from that place, you can respect emotion fully, without ever losing yourself in it. Number 9, self-respect as the foundation of attraction. Self-respect is not something you announce. You don't explain it, defend it, or negotiate it. It's something you carry quietly in the way you think, move, decide, and respond. And whether you realize it or not, this inner posture becomes the foundation of attraction. Not because it tries to impress, but because it refuses to collapse. You feel the difference between wanting to be chosen and knowing your own worth. One is restless, the other is grounded. Stoicism has always pointed to this distinction. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Self-respect begins exactly there, in mastery, in choosing not to abandon yourself just to feel wanted. When self-respect is present, your energy changes. You're no longer reaching. You're no longer shrinking. You're not scanning for approval or reacting to every shift in attention. You stand where you are. That steadiness is rare, and rarity creates value. Wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Read that more broadly. To be unlike chaos, unlike neediness, unlike emotional volatility. Self-respect keeps you from being pulled into states that don't serve you. It makes your reactions measured instead of automatic. And that emotional discipline is felt long before it is understood. Many men confuse attraction with effort. They think doing more, giving more, adjusting more will earn desire. Stoicism dismantles this illusion. Attraction doesn't grow from self-sacrifice that erodes dignity. It grows from alignment. When your actions match your values, there's a coherence to you. You're not fragmented. Seneca warned, "He suffers more than necessary who suffers before it is necessary." The same applies here. You don't rush to prove, explain, or secure. You allow things to unfold without abandoning your center. That patience is not passivity. It is strength under control. Self-respect also governs what you tolerate. This is where many men hesitate because boundaries feel risky. But boundaries are not walls, they are definitions. They tell the world how you treat yourself. When you lack them, you send an unspoken message that your time, energy, and emotional state are endlessly available. That message weakens attraction because it signals imbalance. Reminded himself, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Add to that, if it costs your self-respect, do not accept it. Every time you honor that rule, you strengthen the foundation you stand on. You can feel self-respect in the moments you choose restraint, when you don't chase clarity, when you don't overextend, when you allow silence to exist without rushing to fill it. This is where Stoicism becomes practical. Practice pausing before responding, not as a tactic but as a discipline. Ask yourself, is this response aligned with who I am, or is it driven by fear of losing approval? That single question can change the tone of your interactions entirely. Epictetus taught, make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. Your behavior is in your power, the outcome is not. Another exercise is to audit your inner dialogue. Self-respect begins internally long before it shows externally. Notice how you speak to yourself when things feel uncertain. Are you bargaining with your own standards? Are you minimizing your needs? Stoic practice demands honesty. Write down one standard you refuse to compromise, not for others but for yourself. Revisit it daily. Let it shape your decisions. Over time, this creates an inner consistency that others instinctively trust. What makes self-respect so powerful is that it doesn't seek attention, yet it commands it. You stop trying to be impressive and start being intentional. Your presence becomes calmer. Your words carry less urgency. You don't need to dominate or withdraw. You simply remain steady. Seneca captured this perfectly. A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary. Self-respect removes that unnecessary suffering. It frees you from emotional overinvestment and brings you back to clarity. As you build this foundation, you'll notice a shift. You're less reactive, more deliberate. You no longer interpret every interaction as a test of worth. And in that freedom, attraction naturally grows, not because you pursued it, but because you stopped chasing what was never meant to define you. Wrote, be satisfied with even the smallest progress and treat the result of it as no small matter. This is that progress, quiet, internal, lasting. So commit to this daily, not loudly, not choose self-respect in the small moments, in what you accept, in how you respond, in what you refuse to betray within yourself. This is the foundation. Everything else is built on it. Number 10, leading with values, not fear of loss. One of the most grounding shifts you can make as a man is learning to lead with your values instead of your fear of loss. Fear of loss is subtle. It doesn't always feel like fear. Sometimes it feels like caution. Sometimes it wears the mask of politeness, overthinking, or emotional vigilance. But underneath, it is the same impulse, the need to preserve something external at the cost of your inner alignment. Stoicism asks you to notice this impulse without condemning yourself for it, and then to choose differently. Wrote, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. That sentence alone can dismantle fear-driven behavior. When you act from values, your actions become simpler, cleaner, and far more powerful. Fear of loss makes you reactive. It pulls you into a future that hasn't happened yet and convinces you to behave as if it already has. You start managing outcomes instead of governing yourself. You hesitate when you should be firm. You agree when your body is saying no. You rush to fix emotions that aren't yours to fix. This isn't because you're weak. It's because you're human. But Stoicism reminds you that just because a feeling arises doesn't mean it deserves the steering wheel. Epictetus said, it is not events that disturb us but our judgments about them. Fear of loss is a judgment, not a fact. And once you see it as such, you can stop obeying it. Leading with values means you decide who you are before the moment demands a response. It means your behavior is not a negotiation with circumstance. Your values become your filter. Your internal code becomes louder than external pressure. When you operate this way, you stop scanning for signs of approval or rejection. You stop calculating every move for emotional safety. You act because it is aligned, not because it is safe. Seneca wrote, no man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity. For he is not permitted to prove himself. Fear of loss tries to protect you from discomfort, but in doing so, it robs you of self-respect. Values, on the other hand, give you something solid to stand on when discomfort inevitably arrives. This shift changes your presence in ways you may not immediately notice, but others will. When fear is driving you, your energy is scattered. You speak with an invisible question mark at the end of your sentences. Your actions feel tentative. When values are driving you, there is a quiet finality to how you move. Not rigidity, not arrogance, just clarity. You are no longer trying to avoid loss. You are choosing integrity. Reminded himself daily, never value anything as profitable to you which shall compel you to break your promise, to lose your self-respect. Read that slowly. Loss of self-respect is the only real loss Stoicism asks you to fear. You don't eliminate fear by fighting it. You outgrow it by anchoring yourself in something stronger. Values are that anchor, but they must be lived, not admired. Start with a simple practice. Write down 3 non-negotiable values that define the man you are committed to being. Not traits you wish you had, but principles you are willing to act on even when it's uncomfortable. Keep them short, clear. Then, throughout the day, notice moments where fear of loss tries to override them. The urge to explain yourself, the urge to retreat, the urge to say yes when your inner compass says no. In those moments, pause, breathe, ask yourself, what would acting from my values look like here? Then do that, even if your voice shakes, especially if it does. Another Stoic exercise that strengthens this habit is negative visualization, but applied inward. Instead of imagining external losses, imagine what it would cost you internally to keep abandoning your values. Not dramatically, just honestly. Use this method to strip illusion from desire. When you see clearly that fear-driven actions slowly erode your sense of self, the appeal of approval weakens. You realize that peace does not come from preserving what you fear losing, but from becoming someone who can stand without it. Leading with values also means accepting uncertainty without trying to control it. Fear of loss is a form of control-seeking. It tries to guarantee outcomes. Stoicism teaches you that outcomes are never guaranteed, and that's not a flaw in life, it's a feature. Epictetus was blunt about this. Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. What is in your power is your conduct, your choices, your standards. When you focus there, anxiety loses its grip because you are no longer demanding certainty from the world. You may notice resistance as you begin to live this way. Old habits don't dissolve quietly. The mind will argue. It will tell you that leading with values is risky, that it could cost you connection or comfort. Let that thought exist without obeying it. Stoicism never promised you comfort. It promised you freedom. Seneca said, "He who fears death will never do anything worthy of a man who is alive." Replace death with loss, and the message remains. A life governed by fear is a life half-lived. Over time, something stabilizes inside you. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You stop trying to anticipate reactions. Your actions feel more deliberate, less rushed. You begin to trust yourself again, and that trust becomes your real confidence. Not bravado, not performance, just the quiet knowledge that you will not abandon your principles to avoid discomfort. That kind of confidence cannot be taken away because it does not depend on anything external. So take this seriously but gently. You don't need to transform overnight. You need consistency, one decision at a time, one moment where you choose values over fear. Wrote, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. Leading with values is not a theory, it is a daily practice. And every time you choose it, you reclaim a little more of your strength, your clarity, and your peace. Before you click away, remember this. Stoicism isn't about suppressing desire, it's about mastering yourself. The behaviors you learn today aren't tricks or manipulation tactics. They're principles. And when lived consistently, they change how women feel around you. Calm, safe, intrigued, and drawn in without you ever chasing approval. Most men will watch a video like this, nod along, and go back to the same reactive habits. A Stoic man does the opposite. He reflects. He applies. He becomes rare. If even one of these behaviors becomes part of how you move through the world, your presence alone will start doing the talking for you. So here's your challenge. Don't try to implement all 10 at once. Choose one. Practice it daily. Let it reshape your mindset, your body language, and your standards. Over time, attraction becomes a byproduct, not the goal. If this video gave you clarity, hit the like button. It tells the algorithm to show this message to men who need it. Subscribe if you're serious about self-mastery, masculine discipline, and understanding psychology without losing your edge. And remember, the strongest man in the room never needs to announce it.